is a cetacean researcher at WCS in East Africa, Madagascar, and Western Indian Ocean. Tim is the Africa coordinator of the IUCN Cetacean Specialist Group and a long-standing member of the International Whaling Commission's Scientific Committee. We invited Tim along today because of his extensive experience collaborating with diverse stakeholders, ranging from capacity building in local communities to working with the private sector on reducing underwater noise and engaging governments on critical policy issues. Can't wait to hear what your perspective and hopefully get into a bigger discussion about capacity building at the end. Tim, do you want to take it away?
Well, thank you very much for that, Stephanie. Can you see my screen, first of all?
Yep, you're good. You're good.
Okay, good. So I will just say, Renata, we don't give them nets anymore. That's just not, we don't do that. So give them gear, but not nets. So yes, excuse me. So I live and work in the Western Indian Ocean. I mean, I've spent a lot of time working in Africa, including Gabon and Congo. It's really nice to see those talks, Christos. And I moved to Kenya from Congo in 2016, 2017, and I was fishing around for opportunities. And so something that came across my radar was this new port project in a place called Lamu in northern Kenya. And Lamu is a very sleepy, beautiful, very traditional island with lots of, it's like Zanzibar in miniature, if you like. And it just seemed like a completely crazy idea, a terrible place to put a port. And I had just read at bottom right here, you can see a plot of blue whale sightings that had been recorded and published by Barbara et al. In this disputed triangle between Kenya and Somalia. And I thought, well, I'm going to dig out the EIA and have a look and see what they're saying about, impacts to marine mammals, impacts to blue whales. Maybe there's an opportunity here. Maybe there's an EIA that stipulates some more monitoring. Maybe there's some work. Maybe there's some scope here. And so I found, after quite a lot of digging, a copy of the EIA and was somewhat astonished, perhaps I shouldn't have been, that there was absolutely no mention of impacts to marine megafauna, other than the very local footprint of the project, and certainly no consideration given to the fact that they were planning at least on bringing very large vessels into this very sleepy and in some ways very healthy ecosystem. So reading around a bit more, the plot at the left here, it's a very simple plot to look at. All the dotted lines, it's basically looking at port capacity for different products. This is a World Bank report, and all the dotted lines indicate current capacity. So on the x-axis, you can see the year, and you can see that the solid lines are projected need for imports in Africa over the next 50 years, or at least up until 2050, excuse me. And so port capacity is terrible. It needs to improve. And so that got me thinking, okay, well, if Lamu doesn't do a good job, what are the other ports doing? So I did a not particularly scientific, but I did quite an extensive review of all of the EIAs for new port developments or port expansions that I could find. And I wrote it as a white paper, which I submitted to the Nairobi Convention Science to Policy platform. And it was on underwater noise, shipping, and threats to marine species in the Western Indian Ocean. And that was presented initially at this Science to Policy Forum, which is a sort of an opportunity for scientists in the region to present concerns to member states. And if they feel that there are valid concerns, they will then upscale them to the level of the COP, and you can actually present at the COP. So I was able to present at the COP in Mombasa in August, and it led to this decision at the COP that the Nairobi Convention, which has members from South Africa to Somalia and some of the island states and all the countries in between on the coast, that they would support the development of projects that address underwater noise and shipping. Now, also a member of the Nairobi Convention is the government of France, because France has a lot of French, there's a lot of French territories in the Mozambique Channel and elsewhere. They picked up on this, and we had, as WCS, we have quite a healthy relationship with AFD and FFEM, and they came to us and said, "Can you put together a concept note?" And so it ended up being hosted by the FFEM, and we developed this project to look at underwater noise and shipping in the Western Indian Ocean. And it's led by WCS. There's a very diverse partnership. But FFEM had stipulated, quite rightly, that we work with relevant national agencies and the private sector to look at ways to improve underwater noise. And we decided to include ship strikes as a sort of corollary objective, just because a lot of the data sets were compatible. We did all of this before COVID-19 kicked in. And so between giving that talk and engagement, it took us some time to get going. So we've only really, in the last year, been collecting data. It's a vast partnership. Most of the partners are here. We've added some partners since. And you can see some private sector partners there, but also different NGOs and universities. So the objectives are quite simple in general, and I can read them for you. So it's essentially to carry out, I forgot to mention, the project is called the QUIO project, the Quieter Western Indian Ocean project. And the date has changed. It's no longer 2024. We're now moving into 2026. So we will carry out a scientific assessment of underwater noise from shipping and maritime services in the Western Indian Ocean and assess its effects on megafauna. But the second part of the project was to identify mitigation options in partnership with the private sector and relevant authorities. And the idea being that we would identify practical mitigation measures and then work with those partners to actually try and implement them, knowing full well that that's not a simple ask. So the blue line indicates the sort of EZ of the Nairobi Convention states. And we, after doing an initial review, we decided that we were going to focus on these big red boxes. And so that encompasses, those areas encompass quite a few states. And so we've worked quite hard. This is one benefit of COVID, was we had lots and lots, endless Zoom calls. And so we were able to establish MOUs, if necessary, in Tanzania, Zanzibar, with Madagascar, apply for permits, secure permits, including with Mauritius, which can be quite challenging. We were also able to engage the private sector, shipping sector. So as it's a French-funded project, we had a sort of supported access to a group called the Armateurs de France, which is a big French merchant marine shipping interest group. And through them, we were introduced to a bunch of shipping companies that were keen to have operations in the Indian Ocean. They were keen to participate in our project. We've been in touch with other shipping companies as well, but currently we're focusing on these three. And then also port authorities, particularly in Port Louis in Mauritius, Grand Port in Reunion, and then also the port of Maputo. So I won't read this all through, but the objective one, so looking at species, is relatively simple in its formulation. We're going to develop distribution models of species using existing data, collect new data if we can, particularly with PAM, so with underwater microphones, hydrophones, and then to combine all these data sets as best we can. And there's obviously lots of caveats with that. And then use those data to assess underwater noise and ship strikes. And so for underwater noise, we are using fundamentally a model called QANOPS that's developed by our partners at Quiet Oceans in France. And that model is built with AIS data. And then recognizing that AIS doesn't cover the entire fleet, particularly fisheries, we've been very recently had some excellent engagement and commitment from Global Fishing Watch as well. So they're going to provide sort of AIS-like metrics for sort of vessels that are not trackable using AIS. And then we calibrate those soundscape models using PAM data. And then for building our scenarios, we are planning on using a tool called Ocean Planner, but this is not the only tool, and I'll speak a bit more about Ocean Planner in a bit, which is another tool developed by Quiet Oceans, but which our project, which QUIO has actually contributed to the development of. And then, of course, because we have access to AIS and these other data sets, we can look at collision risks. And also, we are looking at, we hope to, one of our PhD students will be looking at receiver levels of noise along the path of migrating humpback whales. So I'm not going to belabor this. This is just, we've been through this whole data collection exercise and data modeling. We've got access to a vast collection of satellite tracks. So whales in blue, humpback whales in blue, but then lots and lots of turtle data as well. And then using those I should actually carry on. We've got a whole bunch of hydrophones as well in the water. Some of these are ours that we've deployed or are planning to deploy. Others are deployments from previous projects that we have and the data we have access to. On the right is work being conducted by Sal Sergio, one of our partners on the project, and Sal, a few months ago, sailed across the Mozambique Channel deploying units, and he's about to do it again in the opposite direction, picking them up and servicing and dropping them again. The red dot is the red circle is the Davy Ridge, where we weren't able to deploy, but we're hoping to deploy again. And just to go back, you can see that where the shipping lies. So the main Southeast Asia via South Africa to South America route passes by the Mascarenes, so Reunion and Mauritius, and then there's obviously a route, less traffic route, through the Mozambique Channel. And so based on all this, we put it all together in part of our data exploration, and we've since refined the areas that we're going to be looking at. And I should point out that Ocean Planner is a computer-based tool, and it doesn't like odd shapes. So all of our areas of focus now are rectangles. So within that project, recognizing that has quite a heavy focus on large vessels and fishing vessels that can be detected from space using satellites, we looked quite hard for an opportunity to look at small boat traffic as well, and the potential effect small boats were having on marine megafauna. And as luck would have it, partners Globis and Reunion led a project called SCANAR, which is looking at the co-occurrence of vessels with shipping. And amongst that work, they were able to outfit a whole bunch of small boats, whale watching boats, with these very small GPS units. IQOEs, they're very cheap. And so as part of what we're doing within IQOE is to reanalyze all of that data, but to overlay it on soundscape maps. And then using the Ocean Planner tool, which is a tool that ingests soundscapes, it ingests distribution models, and then you then give it some management scenarios that it then computes. Using Ocean Planner, you can actually compute the costs and benefits of a particular management suggestion or management option. I would love to talk more, but I'm trying to keep it within 10 minutes. So the second objective obviously was focused more on how we actually use all these data and all of these efforts to influence behavior of ships and shipping and policy in the region. Just before I carry on, I want you to look at the plot on the top right, which is the light blue line is traffic in 2023 to 2024 in the Mozambique Channel, so traffic moving through the Mozambique Channel. And the dark blue line above it is what's happened since November 2023 and now into this year. And it shows this almost 50% increase in traffic through the Mozambique Channel that is entirely driven by the attacks of the Houthis in the Gulf of Aden and southern Red Sea, that has had a great effect on the behavior of shipping in this region, which sort of, for us, greatly emphasizes the need for a project of this kind. The plan for IQOE is that we are directly supporting that strategic plan of the Nairobi Convention, but we've also had, just through constant engagement with other regional bodies, we've become associated with other projects, including SCOR is a French agency that manages security within French territories. They have developed ship strike models and collision risk models, so vessel-to-vessel collisions for the Mascarenes, and they're currently doing it for the Mozambique Channel, where they have many islands and really quite a large EEZ. And then TAF, which is an agency that manages French biodiversity in French territories, has also come to us, and they have built in what we are calling a IQOE2 component into their latest EU funding project. So you can see here on the right, our box covers more or less the northern Mozambique Channel, and what TAF are proposing to do is to bolt on the southern half of the Mozambique Channel to create another box here. Another platform that we're looking to support is something called the WIO Symphony Data Platform, which is hosted by the Nairobi Convention and built by, essentially funded by the Swedish government as part of an aid package. It has multiple data sets in it, multiple layers, and it was built as a tool to aid marine spatial planning in the region. The other thing that we'll be doing in partnership with the private sector is actually conducting some URN measurements, underwater radiated noise measurements, and that's where vessels by the companies Ponant and Socotra have been lent to the project. And together with partner agencies in Reunion and Madagascar, we'll actually go out and conduct URN tests with them. And this is supportive of projects under IMO. So there are many different mitigations options for underwater noise, and I won't belabor you with those here, but we are planning on at least identifying what those might be. We're also planning on making the private sector aware of what the options are, and then there are plenty of occasions where voluntary measures are being implemented, for instance, around Sri Lanka. So the practical outputs, all shipping companies are looking for costs and benefits. And so part of what we will also do is look at consequences for climate change gases with respect to our route planning exercise and our speed restriction exercises. We are developing practical guides for dissemination, and then we're using practical applications of tools like Ocean Planner. We are actively involved at IMO and the International Whaling Commission. And then, of course, we are actively involved in regional IGOs. And just, if I can, Stephanie, I'll just quickly, as Christos did, just talk to your horizons. I put these two pictures up on the right because I was taught a long time ago when I was first starting out that Fords are better than Ferraris, as in build a Ford, not a Ferrari. And so as part of the second horizon, what we are working with, we know that, for instance, Ocean Planner is not a perfect tool. It uses very generic models for things like ship strike risk and noise modeling. But it's an existing platform, and it allows us to scale up relatively quickly in an area where we know very little. We're working with Global Fishing Watch. They have a whole bunch of tools, and they're looking to adapt their tools to incorporate a noise model. We're using the WIO Symphony tool, which isn't perfect, but it's there, it works. And we contribute data to online repositories. The third horizon, so how we actually move forward, is to radically improve awareness and capacity. And I'm very mindful of what Renata said about capacity building. I also react instinctively to the use of that phrase. We think we need to scale up outreach at all levels. So with kids, with policymakers, when you present noise at the Nairobi Convention and people look at you with blank faces because they've never heard of it before, that's a problem. But then also we need to provide academic pathways, for instance, that are globally competitive and accessible. We need to provide training for practitioners, lots of it. We need to talk to donors. Donors currently in many parts of the world, especially this part of the world, see noise as they see it as a niche concern. They don't see it as a major threat. And just be mindful that most people in this region are reliant in a very large part on maritime protein, so fish. And then we need data. We are really struggling, actually. I showed you all those lovely satellite tracks, but we are suffering for data. And we need lots of it in these under-resourced regions. And then I thought Christos had an excellent point with we need a lot of automated analyses as well. So thank you very much, and apologies for going on.
It's all right. I feel like every speaker went over today, and that was wonderful. And I think the last slide in particular was well worth the extra time.